There's a lot that goes into deciding what player you want to draft and where. What does their upside look like? Do you think you're going to be burnt by them? But most importantly, what's the value within their ADP? So when we're taking a look at some of the early round running backs, we need to decide who we need to have at their current ADP and who we're just going to say no to and avoid. Headliner Nation, today we're going to be breaking down whether we need to have some of these running backs or we need to avoid them at their current ADP. So I'm going to be going through every running back that has a current ADP within the first 2 rounds. And we're going to talk about some pros and cons and whether or not we're going to take them at that current ADP. But first, last week when I dropped my biggest lie in fantasy football video, I told you all that at 1,000 likes, we were going to pick a winner for an autographed Joe Mixon jersey. Well, y'all absolutely smashed that. Thank you for the support, and we're going to be picking a winner right now. But make sure that you also head over to pristineauction.com, create a free account using code word headliners, and you're going to get a $10 off coupon for your very first purchase there. Pristine Auction is a great partner for us, and they give us a ton of stuff for awesome giveaways just like this. So make sure you go over there and show some support. But the winner of the Joe Mixon jersey is going to be at DMitch1173. Congratulations. You're going to be getting the autographed Joe Mixon jersey. Your comment was picked by the randomizer, and we're going to be hooking you up with that jersey. So make sure you send us an email, info@thefantasyheadliners.com, so we can get that jersey over to you right away. But we got to jump right into it, and we're going to kick it off with my boy Christian McCaffrey, who currently has an ADP of 2.7. And depending on where you want to go, it's either Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson, it seems like, at the top of the draft. And the pros to drafting Christian McCaffrey here are clearly the offense that he plays in, going to be getting a full season out in San Francisco now, and the volume. He's going to get work in the passing game, and he's going to get work on the ground. One of the best dual threat running backs in all of football. And he has been for a few years now. But really the biggest con to drafting Christian McCaffrey is just his injury history. You really don't have any argument against taking Christian McCaffrey this high, other than the fact that he spent a couple of years banged up and really hurting his fantasy owners. But this is the best offense that Christian McCaffrey is ever going to have a full season with. And Kyle Shanahan absolutely knows how to utilize him. So I don't care if he's available at number 1, 2, 3, it doesn't matter. He is a must-have at his ADP, especially 2.7. The RB2 right now in drafts is Austin Ekeler, whose 5.3 ADP shows that players are absolutely taking wide receivers over running backs right now. And if you're at the 5th pick and you get Austin Ekeler to fall to you, that should be considered a win right off the bat. Austin Ekeler has the same pros that Christian McCaffrey does. He's going to be playing in a very good offense this year. I expect Justin Herbert to bounce back nicely, especially if the wide receivers can stay healthy. And the fact that they added Quentin Johnson to go on the other side of Mike Williams is going to open up some huge holes in the run game. Yeah, Austin Ekeler didn't have nearly as good of a year on the ground last season as we would have hoped, but he's going to bounce back tremendously, especially if all the weapons are out on the field at the same time. And of course, his volume. We know he's going to be the lead running back there, and he's going to get a majority of the touches on the ground. But he also is a great weapon for Justin Herbert out of the backfield, which going into 2023 actually could be considered a little bit of a con. Because the two biggest issues with Austin Ekeler right now is, number one, the contract concerns. He had some issues, they thought they figured it out, then apparently he still isn't happy. So I'm really hoping we don't run into a situation where Austin Ekeler maybe has like a minor injury and says, nah, I'm going to give it some time, especially considering y'all aren't paying me what I feel I'm worth. And I mentioned the targets a minute ago, but there is a concern for a potential loss of targets this year, especially since they're adding Quentin Johnston. But Austin Ekeler is such a dynamic part of this offense, he's not just going to lose all of his targets. Let's say he were to even lose maybe like 20 targets in a season, which is conceivable, it's still not going to be enough to take away from the fact that he's going to get more work in the passing game than really any other running back that you would draft. And even if he does, Hopefully that increase in efficiency that we just talked about on the ground, especially with the better weapons around him, will offset some of that. And really at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. He's still going to be getting you fantasy points. So even at an average ADP of 5.3, the cons don't outweigh the pros. Austin Ekeler is still a must-have. Now this is where we start to see a huge gap in the running back draft positions. Austin Ekeler has an ADP of around 5.3, where the next closest running back, Bijan Robinson, comes in at an average ADP of 9.3. And Bijan is a very interesting case this year. And let me be very frank and very honest with all of you. I love Bijan Robinson. Everyone does. You can see the talent, and he ended up in the perfect situation. But taking a rookie running back as the third overall running back can be a little risky. It seems like people are trying to draft Saquon Barkley from his rookie season, and there's only ever been one of those seasons. I even did a video trying to break that down for you, because since 2019, there has only been 5 rookie running backs to have RB1 seasons. Now, is Bijan Robinson going to finish as an RB1? I'd be willing to place a lot of money on it. But for him to meet his RB3 total, he's going to have to put together almost 400 total touches, and he's going to have anywhere between 1,700 and 2,000 total yards with 10 touchdowns. But his pros are obviously the draft capital, right? The Falcons spent a very early pick on Bijan Robinson. They're going to utilize him. You don't spend a first-round pick like that on a running back and not use him. And then, of course, the offensive scheme. Arthur Smith loves to run the football. He did it while he was in Tennessee, and he's absolutely going to do it now that he has Bijan Robinson on his team as well. So, obviously, looking at anywhere from 270 to 300 carries alone on the ground absolutely could happen. And then here's where you just decide how risky you want to play it with your first pick. Because again, there is an unknown with Bijan Robinson. We haven't seen him do it before, right? At the NFL level, that is, and with this team. We know he's good. We know he has all the tools in the world to be successful. But there's still a guy there named Tyler Algier that was really, really good last year, and a lot of people don't even realize that. So did Arthur Smith draft Bijan Robinson to give him 400 touches this year, or did he draft him to pair with Tyler Algier and make a two-headed monster that could run all over the league? The good news is Bijan Robinson will likely see all the passing game work out of the backfield. But you still have Cordero Patterson there, which will be utilized. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and is Desmond Ridder going to take the next step? So for me here, do I like the draft ADP of 9.3? Yeah, I don't mind that he's being taken at the end of the first round. That's actually the perfect area for me. What I don't love is that he's the RB3, because there's some guys after him that are a little bit more proven that I would still much rather go with in a redraft league. So his current ADP is actually going to be a push for me. It's not really a must-have, and it's not really a must-avoid either. But at the end of the first round, I'm okay with it. Pushing the end of the first round is going to be Saquon Barkley, who has a current ADP of 11 overall. And he had a fantastic year in 2022, running for over 1,300 yards. But it's the efficiency last season that was a huge drop-off from what we've seen in the past. Was that due to Saquon Barkley? Was it due to the offense around him? There's a lot of question marks there for me. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this because I have a pretty big write-up and video in our draft guide for Saquon Barkley that you're not going to want to miss out on. So if you have the draft guide, make sure you check it out. But obviously his pros is that he's going to be the main weapon in this offense and that he's going to get the volume. He's going to be utilized in the passing game, even if it's not as much as we would have liked to have. And then obviously he'll be getting a majority of the carries on the ground. But the cons are going to be his efficiency. And the main reason is when you take a look at that offense around him, it's not much better than what we saw last season. Yes, they added Darren Waller, which was a good pickup for them. But do we think that Darren Waller from Las Vegas is just going to translate to New York? He had a connection with Derek Carr, and Derek Carr looked his way often. It's not going to just be a one-for-one transfer where we see Daniel Jones do the same thing. And Jalen Hyatt can stretch the field, but are we really getting a true number one, well-rounded wide receiver? Or are we just adding another deep threat, which you really already had in Darius Slayton? So even though Saquon Barkley is going to be getting the volume, I don't think that he's going to have the upside as some of the running backs that are being drafted after him. So for his current ADP, I'm going to go with a must avoid because I just want some of these other running backs with potential higher upside than Barkley. To think that Jonathan Taylor was the number one overall player a year ago and now is barely being drafted within the first round is really crazy to me. Heck, even after Christian McCaffrey burnt people, they were still drafting him at the top of the first round. JT isn't even getting any of that love. But I do anticipate that Jonathan Taylor is going to have a nice bounce back season. And if you look at what he did last season in terms of volume, it was actually on par for the games that he did play compared to 2021. It was just he lacked touchdowns. So of course the injuries are a concern coming back this season. And if he would have scored more last season, his numbers overall would have looked a lot better, even with the injuries included. But his pros is that this is going to be a much better offense this year, led by Anthony Richardson. Now, if you don't believe in Anthony Richardson, you're going to disagree with me here, and that's okay, because at some point in time, you'll be on board with Anthony Richardson, and I'll be able to tell you, I told you so. I don't think people understand the good that Anthony Richardson is going to do for Jonathan Taylor's run game. Do you know how difficult it is going to be for defensive end and linebackers to be able to key on Jonathan Taylor or Anthony Richardson when they run those options? To be able to bring either of those guys down, you're going to have to overcommit. And if you do that, you're going to leave big holes. And these guys are going to find them, which could lead to huge efficiency for JT in 2023. Now, I mentioned the touchdowns a second ago. So one of the cons absolutely is that Anthony Richardson is probably going to steal some of those goal line touchdowns. It's going to happen. And if Jonathan Taylor doesn't score 17 rushing touchdowns again, don't be surprised. That was an anomaly in 2021. We weren't expecting that to happen year after year. But even if you give the guy 10 rushing touchdowns, which absolutely could happen, the volume numbers will be more than enough to go with that. And you do have a right to be concerned with the offensive line. This isn't the top shelf O-line that we saw from a few years ago. This is an offensive line that has been struggling to stay healthy on a consistent basis. But Jonathan Taylor at the back half of the first round is an absolute must-have for me. And considering his ADP is 12.7, he's actually falling into the second round for some drafts as well. So do me a favor, don't pass on this guy. I mean, we've only been telling you guys for 3 straight years now that Nick Chubb is an absolute elite running back. And every single year, people want to argue with us, he just doesn't have the upside as other running backs. And look, it took really one comment from the Browns coaching staff saying, hey, Chubb could see an increased workload in the passing game, and everybody's going crazy now. But even with that happening, again, we're seeing a trend where wide receivers are being taken early and often this season, which has pushed Nick Chubb ADP down to 15.3 overall. And if you're asking questions about this ADP, it's being pulled from multiple platforms across the industry. The biggest pro for Nick Chubb is the fact that he's Nick Chubb. He's one of the best, most talented running backs in all of football. The dude's yards per carry, tackles avoided, I mean everything. It's just off the chart numbers for efficiency year after year after year with Chubb. But the biggest con for him is what are the Browns going to do this season? Because when Deshaun Watson came back last year, they tried to force the pass way more than they should have. It was almost like they were trying to get people to understand and buy into the trade and contract they gave him instead of just letting the offense operate the way it should have. But if Stefanski can find enough balance this year and put together a run-first offense that the pass keys off of, Nick Chubb should see more than enough volume to be one of the league leaders in rushing yards. Now, will he get any passing game work? I don't know. But if he can have a Derrick Henry-like year, it doesn't matter. He's still going to see more than enough volume, more than enough yards, and more than enough touchdowns that this guy should be within the top 5 running backs at the end of the year. So yeah, if you're getting him at the start of the second round, especially if you said, you know what, I am going to go wide receiver in the first, and you get him as your RB1 in the second, you're already off to an awesome start in your draft. He's absolutely a must-have at 15.3 overall. Listen to me carefully. You don't tell the king when he's done. The king will tell you when he's done. And Derrick Henry has not mentioned to anybody yet that he's done. So I'm buying into him again this season. And in the fact that you can get him at the end of the second round, are we being serious right now? Derrick Henry's current ADP is 21.3. Again, these numbers are not arbitrary, people. These were pulled from multiple websites across the industry. This is where people are actually drafting Derrick Henry. Now, with the news that DeAndre Hopkins is signing with Tennessee, I do expect his ADP to rise a little bit. But as of right now, given where it's at, this is an absolute steal. Just think about this for a second. At the beginning of the first round, you could take Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson if you wanted to. And then you could pair him with Derrick Henry at the back of the second. That's a win. Or maybe you did get Austin Ekeler at the beginning of the first round, and then you paired him with Derrick Henry at the end of the second. That's also a win. We know Derrick Henry's pros, right? He's going to be getting the volume. He's one of the most utilized running backs in all of football on the ground, and this is an offense that continues to be a run-first offense. And the good news is that they've added an upgrade at the wide receiver position with DeAndre Hopkins. So even if Hopkins isn't the wide receiver of old, he should still command enough respect that it's going to help open up some lanes. And you're not going to be able to forget about Treylon Burks on the other side. And hopefully my boy Chiggy Oko at the tight end position helps take some of those linebackers away from the line of scrimmage. The only con for Derrick Henry is people are just waiting for him to break down. Yeah, a couple of years ago, he missed some significant time, but it was an injury that was more of like a freak accident. It wasn't really his body breaking down. And last season, he was still Derrick Henry, but unfortunately, because the offense around him was worse than we've seen in years, especially at the quarterback position, it just didn't seem like Derrick Henry of old. Well, Ryan Tannehill is back. The weapons are better. Hopefully everybody's healthy. We absolutely must have Derrick Henry at the end of the second. We were pretty vocal last season about the need to draft Josh Jacobs at his ADP, especially in the dynamic running back rating, an exclusive part of our draft guide that you can't get anywhere else. I told everybody that if he gets enough volume, he is going to have a gigantic season. But I don't know if I can be on Josh Jacobs again for 2023. And honestly, it isn't Josh Jacobs' fault. The pros for Josh Jacobs are going to be the offense is going to run through him. Probably more so than even in recent years. Don't be surprised if Josh Jacobs is the main guy this year. But really the biggest con is Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he going to be enough at the quarterback position to keep a defense honest? And that's why the con outweighs the pro here for me with Josh Jacobs. Because if Jimmy G cannot be the guy, it's not going to matter if the offense runs through Jacobs or not. Devontae Adams is going to command a lot of that respect, but Jacoby Myers is a good wide receiver too, but he's not a guy that really scares anybody. Hunter Renfrow really doesn't either, and he got rid of Darren Waller. So if we see a really large drop in Josh Jacobs' efficiency, I don't know how much of the volume is going to be enough to help offset that. And playing in the AFC West is not going to be a cakewalk either. If you can't score points, you're going to be behind to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, and maybe even the Denver Broncos. And then you're going to find yourself in a position where you have to throw more, rendering Josh Jacobs useless. So unfortunately, because of that, there's a few options behind Josh Jacobs that I just like more than him right now. So his current ADP is going to become a must avoid for me. Coming in with the same exact ADP of Josh Jacobs is going to be Tony Pollard, who's also being drafted an average of 21.7. This does not surprise me at all. If we knew that he was 100% healthy and he wasn't coming off that major injury from last season, he probably would be a first-round running back. So it's good to see that those of you out there who are already drafting or practicing drafting are not going a little bit too crazy with Pollard before we hear about his health. But listen, Tony Pollard can be just as dynamic as any of the top running backs. On a per-touch basis, Tony Pollard is absolutely fantastic. And he was another guy last year like Josh Jacobs that I absolutely bought into based on those type of scores. But are the question marks going to be too much for that? Once again, we don't really know where he's at health-wise right now. So depending on how early you draft, you might be taking a shot at Tony Pollard, not knowing whether or not he's going to be a guy that is going to be ready to go week 1. And up until this point, Tony Pollard has been really good as a partner in crime with Ezekiel Elliott. Not anymore. He's going to be the guy this season. How does that affect him? Do they plan on trying to get Tony Pollard 300 total touches this season? And if they do, is he going to be able to hold up to that? As much as I love Tony Pollard, until I know more about whether or not he's going to be fully healthy for week 1, he is a must avoid at this ADP. There's just some guys still going right behind him that I would feel more comfortable taking to begin with, and not Tony Pollard. Now that could change though. If we get a few weeks from now and they're like, no, Tony Pollard is good to go, we see that he's fully healthy and everything like that, then this could turn into a must-have. But really it's going to be about, are you willing to risk it, especially if this is a guy you're taking as your RB1. Now, Headliner Nation, I know that there's going to be a few guys missing from here that you're going to be questioning, like, hey, where is so-and-so? They didn't make the first 2 rounds of current ADP. And again, these numbers are not just something I'm pulling out of my butt, Headliner Nation. These are actual numbers from websites in the industry on where players are currently being taken. And no, I am not using best ball ADP here because it is much different. I'm using redraft league format ADP. But in the comments down below, let me know who you think will be the biggest steal this season at their current ADP, and back it up with some facts for me as well. And before you get out of here, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because Headliner Nation, appreciate you all stopping in for this content. Peace out, stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.